Ever wonder who really pulled the strings in the Middle Ages? Shocked to hear it might have been women. Ready to have your medieval history knowledge turned upside down? Number 5. Abbesses, the female CEOs of the Middle Ages. Did you know some medieval women controlled vast wealth and land comparable to male nobles? It's true. While most medieval women had limited options, those who became abbesses often wielded extraordinary power. Take Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German abbess, who wasn't just running a monastery, she was a powerhouse. Managing massive estates, overseeing agricultural production, and controlling significant wealth, Hildegard had more economic influence than most men of her time. When she wanted to establish a new convent at Rupertsberg, she didn't ask for permission. She made it happen despite fierce opposition from male monastics. These abbesses weren't just spiritual leaders. They were the medieval equivalent of CEOs. They managed budgets, supervised construction projects, and negotiated with merchants. The Abbey of Fontevraud in France even had abbesses ruling over communities of both men and women, with male monks answering to female leadership. What made this possible? In the medieval church, abbesses underwent a consecration ceremony strikingly similar to that of bishops. They received rings and croziers, those fancy curved staffs, as symbols of their authority and spiritual marriage to the church. Many abbesses came from noble families, bringing connections and political savvy to their roles. The influence of these women extended beyond monastery walls. In Anglo-Saxon England, abbesses like Hilda of Whitby participated in church councils alongside bishops and kings. Hilda hosted the famous Synod of Whitby in 664, where crucial decisions about church practices were made. Imagine that. Major church policies decided at a meeting hosted and influenced by a woman. In Germany, imperial abbesses held even greater power. These women answered only to the emperor himself, controlling vast territories and enjoying political privileges most medieval people could only dream of. Some imperial abbesses even minted their own coins and collected taxes, activities typically reserved for royalty. Number 4. Mystics, speaking truth to power through divine connection. How could a medieval woman criticize a king and live to tell the tale? By claiming God told her to do it, of course. Female mystics, women who claimed direct communication with God, found unique ways to speak out in a society that generally silenced women. Catherine of Siena, a 14th century mystic, didn't just pray quietly at home. She inserted herself into major political conflicts, including the papal schism that divided Western Christianity. Catherine wrote bold letters to popes and rulers advocating for church reform and peace among Italian city-states. What's remarkable is that these women gained authority precisely because they operated outside traditional power structures. While they couldn't become priests or bishops, their claimed direct channel to divine wisdom gave them a different kind of authority that was harder to challenge. After all, if you believe someone speaks for God, their gender becomes less important. Take Julian of Norwich, who in the 14th century became essentially a spiritual celebrity. Following a serious illness where she experienced 16 divine revelations, Julian wrote Revelations of Divine Love, the first known book written in English by a woman. People from all walks of life, including royalty, sought her counsel from her anchoress cell attached to a church in Norwich. These mystics often embraced extreme ascetic practices, extended fasting, self-flagellation, or wearing hair shirts. Physical suffering, they believed, brought them closer to Christ's suffering. Modern people might find these practices disturbing, but medieval society viewed such extreme devotion with awe and respect. Bridget of Sweden leveraged her mystical experiences to found a new religious order, the Brigittines. This wasn't just a personal spiritual journey, it was institution building on a grand scale. Her order spread throughout Europe with monasteries housing both men and women, though always under female leadership. Perhaps most surprisingly, many female mystics developed theological ideas that subtly challenged church doctrine. Julian of Norwich described God using feminine imagery, calling Christ Mother in some passages. Hildegard of Bingen created elaborate theological works featuring feminine divine figures like Sapientia, wisdom. In a religious tradition dominated by male imagery, these women carved space for feminine spiritual perspectives. Number 3. Patrons and philanthropists, buying influence through pious giving. Could medieval women shape their communities through strategic spending? Absolutely, and they did it under the guise of religious devotion. Wealthy medieval women found power through religious patronage, funding churches, monasteries, hospitals, and religious art. While seemingly acting out of simple piety, these women were actually making savvy power moves, ensuring their names and influence would endure for centuries. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of medieval Europe's most fascinating women, strategically funded religious institutions throughout her lands. At Fontefraud Abbey, where she eventually retired and was buried, Eleanor's patronage bought her not just prayers for her soul, but ongoing political influence. The abbey became a power center for the Plantagenet dynasty she helped build. Even women without Eleanor's royal status used religious giving to enhance their standing. Merchant-class women in medieval Italian cities founded hospitals and commissioned religious artwork, placing their family names and sometimes their own images in these public displays of piety. A woman might not be able to hold public office, but she could see her name inscribed on a hospital building in the center of town. Women's religious patronage often reflected distinctly female priorities. Many funded institutions specifically serving women, convents for unmarriageable daughters, shelters for widows, or hospitals specializing in childbirth. Through these targeted donations, women created support networks for other women within the acceptable framework of religious charity. In England, Lady Margaret Beaufort, mother of King Henry VII, funded scholars at Cambridge University and established professorship. Through religious and educational patronage, she built a network of educated men loyal to her, extending her influence into intellectual spheres typically dominated by men. Religious patronage also offered medieval women a form of immortality. A noble woman might commission an illuminated prayer book featuring her portrait kneeling before the Virgin Mary, combining piety with personal promotion. These books, passed down through generations, ensured their female commissioners wouldn't be forgotten. Some women even used religious donations to assert independence from difficult marriages. By establishing separate charitable foundations or making individual donations, wealthy wives created spaces of influence outside their husband's control, building personal reputations as pious benefactors. Number 2. Beguines creating independent female community. Have you heard about the medieval women who weren't quite nuns, but definitely weren't ordinary lay women either? The Beguines represented one of the most remarkable female-led movements in medieval Europe. Beginning in the 13th century in the Low Countries, modern Belgium, Netherlands, and northern France, Beguines created an entirely new way of religious life. Unlike nuns, they took no permanent vows, maintained control of their property, and could leave to marry if they chose. Yet they lived in communities dedicated to prayer, charity, and sometimes manual labor, like textile production. What made Beguines truly revolutionary was their independence. Their communities weren't supervised by male clergy the way convents were. They elected their own leaders, managed their own finances, and created their own rules. In an era when women were expected to be under male authority, whether father, husband, or bishop, beguines carved out spaces of female autonomy. These women came from all social classes. Some were wealthy widows seeking community after their husbands died. Others were urban working women looking for safe, respectable housing. Still others were educated women drawn to the intellectual and spiritual freedom Beguine communities offered. Beguines supported themselves through various means. Many worked in textile industries, particularly wool processing and linen production. Others served as teachers, nurses, or caregivers for the elderly. Some wealthier Beguines lived on personal income from rents or investments. This economic self-sufficiency was crucial to their independence. Their communities ranged from small houses with a handful of women to large beguinages that functioned almost like towns within towns. The Groot Beguinoth in Leuven, Belgium, housed hundreds of women in a complex with its own church, hospital, and dozens of houses arranged around green spaces, a female-governed urban community. Church authorities often viewed Beguines with suspicion precisely because they operated outside established feminine roles. Without formal vows or male supervision, these women seemed dangerously independent. Some Beguines were investigated for heresy, and a few were even executed, like Marguerite Porete, burned at the stake in Paris in 1310 for her mystical right. Despite these challenges, Beguines thrived for centuries. Their communities provided spaces where women could develop their spirituality, intellects, and practical skills without male oversight. Some Beguine houses survived into the 20th century, representing nearly 700 years of women creating alternative paths for themselves within medieval Christianity. Number 1. Queens and noble women. Wielding power through religious legitimacy. Did medieval queens secretly run the show? Was religion their secret weapon? While medieval Europe was undoubtedly patriarchal, strategic use of religious devotion helped some royal and noble women accumulate surprising political power. By cultivating reputations for exceptional piety, these women gained influence that extended far beyond what their official positions allowed. Queen Matilda of England, wife of William the Conqueror, exemplified this approach. While her husband was busy conquering and governing, Matilda commissioned religious buildings and manuscripts, developing relationships with powerful churchmen. Her religious patronage wasn't just spiritual, it was political networking that extended her influence throughout the kingdom. Many medieval queens served as intercessors, mediating between their husbands and those seeking royal favor. This role, modeled on the Virgin Mary's role as intercessor between humanity and Christ, gave queens legitimate access to political power. A queen might process into court alongside her husband, openly accepting petitions that she would later present to the king. This wasn't mere ceremony. It was sanctioned political influence. Religion also provided queens with public leadership opportunities. When King Louis IX of France, St. Louis, went on crusade, his mother, Blanche of Castile, ruled as regent. Her reputation for devout Catholic faith helped legitimize her unusual position as a female sovereign. Religious devotion made her authority more palatable in a society uncomfortable with women wielding political power. Royal women across Europe founded and reformed religious houses, not just as expressions of faith, but as extensions of their political influence. These institutions often housed royal daughters and female relatives, creating networks of family-controlled religious centers that supported dynastic interests while appearing purely devotional. In Eastern Europe, several women went even further. Helena of Serbia, Queen of Hungary, leveraged her Orthodox Christian connections to strengthen diplomatic ties between Catholic Hungary and Orthodox states. Her religious background made her valuable in ways that transcended normal gender limitations. Perhaps most remarkably, religion sometimes provided medieval noble women with legitimate reasons to defy their husbands. Elizabeth of Hungary left her husband's court to care for the poor against his wishes, her disobedience justified by higher religious calling. Hedwig of Silesia essentially lived separately from her husband to pursue religious devotion, yet was celebrated rather than condemned because her choices were framed as spiritual rather than rebellious. When widowed, pious, noble women often gained unprecedented independence. Rather than remarrying, a widow might establish a religious house where she maintained control of her property and person while gaining respect for her devotion. Donating land to the church while retaining lifetime control gave these women both security and status. What's most fascinating about these royal women isn't just that they found ways to exercise power, it's how skillfully they navigated the narrow spaces available to them, using the very religious structures that limited women to carve out spheres of influence. Their devotion may have been genuine, but it was also pragmatic, allowing them to pursue ambitions that would otherwise have been forbidden. So who really had the last laugh in medieval power games? Were the most successful women those who played by the rules, or those who used the rules creatively to their advantage?